In next step, I want to create the context. So let's do it and let's open our Explorer, go to the src and auth, and here we want to create a new file. Let's create a new file with name of auth.context.tsx. That's it. In first step, let's import some of the files that we need. For example, from the React, we can import React node, and also we need create context and use reducer and use callback, and also we need use effect. So after this, we need to import some things from the types/auth type. So what types and interfaces do we need? We need auth.context, and also we need auth.context action and auth.context action types, and also we need auth.context.state and login response DTO from this type/auth types. So after this, let's import get session and set session from the auth.utils that we created in the previous section. After that, let's import the Axios instance that we created in utils/Axios instance. And after that, let's import toast from React Hot Toast. We imported this toast from this library that we created in the initial step of our project creation. After that, let's import use navigate from React Router DOM. And after that, we need to import some configs from this /util/global configs. For example, we need the login URL, and also we need new URL and path after login, and also path after logout, and path after register, and also register URL. So this is all we need to use in this context file. Let's use format document. Good. And now let's go to the next step. So here, first let me add some comments here to show you. We need a reducer function for this reducer hook. So let's create it first. So we will create a function with name of const auth reducer, which equals to an arrow function. And what is the input of this arrow function? The first one is an state with type of auth.context.state that you can see that we imported it from /type/auth types. After that, we need to receive the action, which is type of auth.context actions, and you can see that we created them previously in our types. That's it. So let's go to the body of this auth reducer, and here we will have an if condition, and we'll check that if the action type equals to auth.context action types.login, what we need to do, we need to return an object, and inside of this object, first we will return the previous state using this spreading if, and after that we say that is authenticated is true and is auth loading is false, and then user is action.payload. That's it. So in type of the login, we will return this object. Then let's go and have another condition, and in this condition we check that if the type of the action is logout, which is coming from auth.context action types.logout. Let me show you that quickly. So we created this inside of auth.types.ts. This is an enum. You can see that we have initial and login and logout. I'm just using this login and logout, but I created this initial, and you can use them if you want. So let's continue. So if the type equals to logout, we need to return another object with the previous state, and we will change the is authenticated to false, and also is outloading to false, and the user would be undefined. So in case of logout, we will say that is authenticated is false and the user is undefined. That's good. And in type of the other action types, we will simply return this state. So let's format the document, and this is our auth reducer. We will use it. So let's minimize it and go to the next line. And after this reducer, we need to have an initial state object for our use reducer hook. So let's create it. And here I will define an initial auth state with type of auth action state, and it would be an object, and inside of this object I want to have is authenticated with the initial value of false, and also is auth loading with initial value of true, and a user with initial value of undefined. This is it. So let's format the document. So this is an initial state object. Let me add this object here for the use reducer hook, and that's it. So let's minimize it and go to the next line. And after this, we need to create our context here and export it. So let's create it here. So let's export const of auth context. This is our auth context, and we export it, and it equals to create context with the type of auth context or null, and for the initial value of it, we will use null. So this is our main context, and you can see that we are exporting it, so we can use it on other files and modules. So let's format the document and go to the next line. After this, I want to create an interface for our context props. So let's create it. I simply create an interface of iProps, and you know that the interface is an object, and inside this object of my prop, I just want to have the children with type of React node. So let's format the document and minimize it. So this is the props that we are going to use for our context component. Now, let's create a component to manage all of auth functionalities, and we export it and use it in all of our projects. So let's do this. So I create a const of auth context provider, which equals to an arrow function, and inside of this arrow function, we are going to receive the props, but we structure the props to the children, and we say that the type of this children is iProp. So this is it. You can see that I'm using this interface for my component, and it will return an object. Inside this auth context provider, I want to create a const of state, and dispatch equals to a use reducer, and for this use reducer, we will receive this auth reducer that we created on the top of this file, and also the initial auth state. So this is it. We created the reducer that we want to use it, and using the state and the dispatch, we can receive its values and change its values. After this, let's create a navigate, which equals to use navigate, and we'll use this hook inside of our file. And then let's have an initialization method. So we need to have a method to initialize our reducer when we are starting our program. So let's implement it. So let's create it, and we say that const of initialize auth context equals to a use callback. We use this use callback hook to avoid the unnecessary renders. And inside this use callback, we can create an async function, and then for the dependency array, we use just this empty array. And inside this function, let's create a try catch block, because it's really important to work with try catch, and in the catch, we will receive the error and work with it. So inside of this try, the first thing is I want to have the token, and I receive this token from get session that we created in our auth utils before. And I will check that if the token exists, I will do something else, I will do something else. So if the token exists, I want to validate access token by calling our backend, because this token must be validated, and if somebody changes it in the local storage, we want to validate it to be sure that it is true and valid. So let's do it, and I say that const of response equals to await of access instance dot post. So we need to have a post method, and with the return type of I login response DTO. And what is the URL? The URL is me URL that we created. You can see that it is /auth/me, and we created it and use it here. And also we need to send some data. So the data is an object, and inside this object we send the token. So you know that the token, the key and the value is token, so we simply return just this token to the backend. And after this, in the response, we will receive the JWT token and the user data, and you saw this previously on the backend section. So we are receiving the token and the user data, and we want to destructure it. So we destructure the new token and the user info from response.data. And then we will set the session to new token. So we will send this new token to the set session method, and it will be saved on the local storage. That's it. Let's continue. After this set session, we call dispatch. So we want to dispatch, and inside of this dispatch, we send the type of auth.context.tsx, and we send the payload of user info. So this will call the dispatch method, and it will save the user info to the context, and also it change the type of is authenticated to true. We saw that on the top. And else we want to set the session to null. So if the token is not exist, we simply say that the set session of null, and also dispatch with type of auth.context.types.logout, and that's it. And if in this process we catch any error, we will simply go to this catch section, and here we can again say that set session to null, please, and also we again dispatch with type of auth.context.types.logout. So you can see that in case of invalid token, we can simply set the session to null and dispatch with the logout. That's it. So I think it's okay. Let's format the document. That's good. And minimize this initial and go to the next step. Then we need to check that in the startup application, we must call the initialize auth context to be sure about the authentication status. So let's create a use effect for it. So I will create a use effect, and inside of that, I create a function with an empty array form with dependency array. And inside this use effect, the first thing is I want to have a log of auth context initialization start. And after this, I want to call the initialize auth context. And after this, you know that we can have the dot catch because it's returning a promise. And instead of then, I will say that console.log, the initialized auth context was successful. And in case of any error that we are going to the cache, I receive the error and I simply console.log this error. That's it. So let's format the document and minimize it. So we created this initial auth context method and we use it inside this use effect. So always we are sure about our authentication. Let's minimize them and go to the next line. So the next thing is we need to have a register method for registering our user to the website. So we create this here. I create a const of register which equals to again a use callback. We again use the use callback here, and inside of this I want to have an async method, and after this async method I want to have an empty array for my dependency array. So what we are going to receive inside this async function, we want to receive the first name with type of a string and also a last name with type of a string, and again a username and an email and also the password and the address. So we are receiving the first name, last name, username, email, password and address inside of this function. And what we are going to do with this data, so we will have a backend call. So we say call of response equals to await of axios instance.post, and we send this request to the register URL. You can see that it is /auth/register, and we need to send some data because this is a post method, and we send an object, and inside this object we want to send the first name and also the last name and the username and email and password and the address. So this is it. This is our request to the backend, and we have the result inside of this response. So after this, I simply log the message of register result equals to this response, and after that I want to send a notification. So I simply use toast.success with message of register was successful, please log in. And after that I simply use this navigate, which is coming from, let me show you, this navigate equals to this use navigate hook, and inside this use navigate I will use the path after register. That's it. So let's format the document. Now this is it. Now you can see that we are using this path after register. So what is this? This is inside of global config that we created it. So from here we can manage all of them. So I say that path after register equals to login. So we will use it here inside of this register method, and we say that after the successful register, navigate our user automatically to path after register. That's it. So you can see that how useful it is. So let's minimize this register and go to the next functionality of our context. And after register, I want to have the login method. So let's create it, and I will have the const of login, which equals to again a use callback, and inside this use callback I want to have an async function, and after this function I want to have this empty array which is for my dependencies. So this is it. Let's implement the use callback of the login. So what we are going to receive, we are going to receive the username with type of a string, and also we receive the password. We use this username and password to the login. So inside of this body, let's create the response which equals to await of axios instance dot post method. So this time we are using the post method, and for the return type we are using login response DTO because we want this response. And then this is the URL of us, the login URL, which is /auth/login. And because this is a post method, we need to send the username and password to the server. So let's create an object after this URL, and inside of this object I want to send the username and also the password to the backend. So this is it, and after this response we will wait for it, and after this we send this toast.success notification and we say that the login was successful. This is it, and after this in the response we receive the JWT token, and the user data. So let's destructure them. We say that const of new token and user info equals to response.data, and then we set session this new token. So you saw that we created this session and we send this new token to it. It will handle everything for us, and it will send this token to the request headers, and also it save it inside of the local storage. After this set session, I want to dispatch. So what is the type of our dispatch? We want to dispatch auth.context.action-types.login, and also for the payload, we send this user info to dispatch, so it will be saved inside of our auth context. And after this dispatch, we can simply navigate our user automatically to path after login. So what is this path after login? Let's click on it. You can see that path after login equals to path dashboard.dashboard. So you can change it to anything you want, and all of them would be configured here inside of global config.ts. That's it. So I think everything is good. Let's format the document. That's it, and minimize it and go to the next method. After the login, we want to have a logout method. So let's create it. This logout is really a simple method, which is again a use callback, and inside this use callback we can create a simple arrow function with an empty dependency array. This time we don't use async because this is not an asynchronous method, and instead of this we can simply use set session of null, and after that we can dispatch our state, and we say that your type is auth.context.action-types.logout, and after this we can navigate our user automatically to path after logout. So let's check it. What is the path after logout? It is public.home. That's it. So you can change it to anything you want from here, from the global config. So this is it. You can see that this was easy. So let's format the document, and this is it. So we created the logout method, and let's minimize it and continue. We want to return the provider, but for the values, let's create its values here. So we create an object for the value of our context provider here, and I think this will keep our code more readable. So let's create it here. This object would be a const of values object equals to an object, and inside that what we need to return to the context consumers. Well, the first one is authenticated key with the value of state.isAuthenticator, and after that I want to return isAuthLoading, and its value would be state.isAuthLoading, and after that I want to return the user, which equals to state.user, and after that I simply return this register method and login method and logout method. So you can see that we are returning these 6 functions and states, and let's format the document. So this is my values object. Let's minimize it, and finally let's create our provider. So let's return the auth.context.provider, and for this provider, inside of it we can simply use the value, and for the value we can use this values object that we created here with these. So these values would be returned to this auth context, and we can access them in all of our projects. And inside of this auth context provider, we can simply return these children. So let's format my document, and I think everything is okay. And after this object, we want to export it. So let's export default of auth context provider, and let's format the document and have a quick overview of this context again. So we created a reducer function for our useReducer.hook, and after that we created an initial object of state for our useReducer.hook, and after that we created our main context here, and we exported it so we can use it everywhere we want. And then we created an interface of iProv for our provider. Then we created our auth context provider, and we'll use it inside of our project. So this is it, and we will receive these children, and inside this auth context provider we created a useReducer, and it returns the state and dispatch, and it will receive the authReducer and initial auth state. And then we created this navigate. Then we have this initialize method, and we call this method in a use effect in the start of our application. Then we have this register method, and after this we have this login method, and after it we have this logout method, and after logout method we created this object, and we used this object inside of our auth provider, and that's it. Now we can use this auth context provider inside of our main component. Let's do this. Let's go to the main.tsx, and here we are using React.strict mode. So let's delete this. We need to import this auth context. Let's copy this from here, and I say that we need to receive this auth context provider, and we wrap it around this app. That's it. So let's format the document, and we need to delete this. Again, let's use format document. That's good. Now you can see that we don't need this React here. Let's cut it and format the document again. Well, our auth context provider is created successfully. Now we are using it inside of the main.tsx, and the app is inside of it, so we have access to this context in all of our project. Let's close it, and also let's close this auth context.provider and minimize everything. After context, let's create a custom hook for it. So let's go to the src, and inside the hooks, let's create a new file with name of useAuth.hook.ts. That's it. Let's minimize it for now. And inside of this hook, I first import the use context from the React, and also I import auth context that we created previously inside of /auth/auth context. Then I will create my useAuth, which equals to an arrow function, and I can simply export the file with useAuth. And inside of this, I will create the const of context, which equals to use context of auth context. So this is my context, and then I will check that if this context is not exist, I can simply throw a new error with the message of use auth context is not inside of auth provided tag. This is not important, but we will check that, and if it is not ready, we throw a new error, else we simply return this context. That's it. Let's format this document. So this is it, and we can use this hook inside of all of our function, and we don't need to import the context and also the auth context separately. So I think it's okay, and let's close it and go to the next step. In this step, we want to create a guard for the protection of our components, but we need to handle the situation of loading when we are working with our authentication and authorization. So let's create a new beautiful component for it, and then we create our guard component. So let's go to the components, and inside of the components, inside of the general, I want to create a new component with name of AuthSpinner.tsx. You can ignore this, but I think this is really a good idea. So let's use our AFCE to create a new component inside of here. I don't need this React here. Instead, I will import this icon of P detective from React icons /pi. That's it. So let's go here, and inside this AuthSpinner, let's delete this, and here we have a division, and again inside of that let's have another division, and after that let's have an h1, and inside this h1 I want to use this P detective, and inside of this I want to have some class names like width of 40 and also height of 40 and text of purple of 700. So let's format the document, but I want to have some other class names, so let's create them. So I want to have width of 80 and also height of 80 and margin X of auto, and also I use flex with justify of center and align items of center and also a position of relative. That's it. Then for this division, let's have some class names like absolute, and then width of full and height of full, and also inset of 0 and border of 8 and border purple of 300 and also border top of purple of 700 and rounded of full and also animate of spin. This is it. So for this division I use this, and I think everything is okay. So let's format the document, and I think it's okay. So we are exporting this AuthSpinner. Now we can use it everywhere we want. So let's close this AuthSpinner and minimize everything and go to the next step. And for the next step, let's again go to the auth, and here I want to create a guard component. So let's right click and create a new file with name of authGuard.tsx. So let's close this explorer and work on it. First, let's do our import. So I want to use the navigate and outlet, and they are importing from React Rotterdam. And then I want to import this useAuth. We want to use it here. Also, I need this AuthSpinner that I just created it, and also I need to use path of public from routes/path. That's it. And here we need to have an interface for the props of this AuthGuard, and this is really important, so please take a look at it carefully. So what do we need? We need to receive a roles array, and we will decide the next step based on this array. So let's create it. We simply say that interface of iProps is an object, and inside this object we want to receive the rows, which is type of an array of strings. That's it. So let's format the document and go to the next step and create our component. So let's create our component, which is const of AuthGuard, which equals to an arrow function, and we simply return this arrow function as export default of AuthGuard. That's it. So what we are going to receive as a props, we are receiving an object with rows, and this is a type of this interface, which is iProp. So we are receiving these rows, and then we want to destructure the is authenticated and also the user and the is auth loading from our use auth. And then let's check that do we have access to the requested page, and if yes, the page will be rendered inside of this auth that we created soon. So let's test it. We create a new variable with name of has access, and we say that if is authenticated is true, and we check that if the user dot roles dot find, and inside of this find we want to find that if for each one of them we create this arrow function, and we say that for each item that is q, you need to check that if the roles dot includes this q. So if each of them is exist inside of this roles, this has access would be true, else it would be false. And after that we check that if the is auth loading is true, we want to say the user that you need to wait, so we simply return this AuthSpinner that we just created. That's it. So now you can see that why I'm using that AuthSpinner. So in case of any loading, we simply return this AuthSpinner, else we can simply return that if the has access is true, we can simply return this outlet, that this outlet is coming from the React router now, and it allows the other routes to be rendered inside of this AuthGuard. Else we can simply return this navigate, and we say that please navigate to the path of public dot unauthorized path. Let's check it. What is this? So you can see that this is /unauthorized. So this is it, and after it, this is the final return of us, and then we have this export default of AuthGuard. So let's format the document and have a quick overview of it. So what we have done inside this AuthGuard, this is one of the most important components of our website that allows us to implement the role-based authorization. So we are using this AuthGuard, we're sending this role to the AuthGuard, and then we check that if the logged in user has one of these roles, so we simply return this outlet. This outlet allows the React router to render the other children roles inside of this, else we simply navigate our user automatically to path of public dot unauthorized. That's it. So I think it's okay. Let's close it and also close everything and go to the next step.